The Baltimore Orioles cannot be stopped. They won their 10th game in a row on Wednesday night, and they are over 500 in mid-July. I'll recap another O's win. Plus, we talk about Trey Mancini and why the Orioles should not trade him at this year's deadline. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, July 14th, 2022, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we start by recapping another Orioles victory as they beat the Cubs 7-1 at Wrigley Field on Wednesday night to sweep a two-game set. They've won their 10th in a row, and the Orioles have a winning record in July for the first time since 2017. Then we'll take a look at the topic that has just infatuated Birdland over the last couple of days, and really over a lot of the season. Should the Orioles trade Trey Mancini at the upcoming MLB trade deadline? I'll give both sides the argument, but tell you why the O's should hold on to Trey for the rest of this season. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So before we get into talking O's and Cubs, just want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you could give us a 5-star rating and a review on either of those apps. That really helps the pod. And of course, we're right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. Make sure to hit that red subscribe button. Thank you so much for all the views on these last few episodes on YouTube, especially on Tuesday's episode, as we had Joe Doyle of Prospects Live on the podcast to discuss who the Orioles will be taking with the number one overall pick in Sunday night's 2022 MLB draft. Make sure to check out that episode and many others here on the YouTube channel. Like, comment, and subscribe as well. But thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. And for your first listen today, let's start with what happened at Wrigley Field. Orioles 7 and Cubs 1 as the Orioles sweep their third consecutive series. They have won 10 games in a row, and they are now 45-44 on the season. That's right. The Baltimore Orioles on July 13th, 2022, have a winning record. They're going to have a winning record on the 14th, and they're going to have a winning record on the 15th because they've got today off as well. 10 wins in a row. A team that was 24-35 just about a month ago has now won 10 straight games and gotten themselves over 500. Wow. Now the team still sits 2 games out. Quite frankly, they're actually 2.5 games out at this point, with Seattle sweeping a doubleheader over the Nationals and the Blue Jays beating the Phillies again on Wednesday night. But the Orioles still just those 2 games out. Not sure why I said 2.5. It's 2. 2 games out behind Seattle and Toronto, still right in the thick of things. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 7-1 win over the Cubs on Wednesday night. The first thing you need to know is, well, the O's jumped on the Cubs early in this one. 3 runs in the first inning off of Chicago starter Justin Steele. Now, Steele ended up going 6 innings, allowing 4 runs and 3 of them earned. But the O's got him early, 3 runs in the first. They got a couple of singles from Mullins and Mountcastle, and then Anthony Santander rips a double into left center field, scoring 2 runs, putting the O's up 2-0. Then Austin Hayes singles, brings home another run to make it 3-0. And they just jumped right ahead, and that's not something they did on Tuesday night. Remember, they trailed 2-0 early in Tuesday night's game against the Cubs, and they've trailed early in some of these games. But it was nice to see a big crooked number in the top of the first inning before you even send your defense and your pitcher out there to get that big number. That really, really helped out. And the second thing you need to know from this one is that, that was not all for the Orioles offense, those 3 runs in the first. And a big reason why is that Austin Hayes had a huge bounce back game for the O's. Hayes goes 4 for 5 in this one with a double and 3 singles and 4 hard hit balls on the day for Hayes. And this was much, much needed for Austin Hayes because, as we talked about on Monday's episode, Hayes was not an all-star selection, and deservedly so. You know, we talked a couple weeks ago about how I thought he was right on the bubble for the AL all-star roster. Well, he went into a bad slump, and that continued. You know, he had an 0 for 4 on Tuesday night. Austin Hayes was 3 for 42 at the plate over his last 11 games coming into Wednesday night's game. And what does he do? Turn things completely around with a 4 for 5 day. Huge game for Austin Hayes at the dish. That double in the 8th was 105 off the bat. And even his ground out, his one time he was out, was a hard hit ball in the 6th inning, 95.7 miles per hour off the bat. Swung the bat very, very well in this game, and hopefully that gets his swing back and gets him out of that kind of elongated slump that he was in for the Orioles, because when his bat is going, this offense is at a different level. Third thing you need to know from this one is we turn our eyes to the pitching. Spenser Watkins just did what Spenser Watkins has been doing once again in this one. Watkins goes 5+ innings in this start, allowing 1 run on 4 hits, strikes out 5 with 2 walks, no home runs allowed, throws 86 pitches and lowers his ERA to 3.93 on the season, and just 4 hard hit balls against Watkins in his 5+ innings of work. He did come back out for the 6th inning, allowed a leadoff single in the bottom of the 6th with the Orioles leading 4-1, and then was removed from the game in favor of Dylan Tate. But all in all, this is all you can really ask for out of Spenser Watkins. He's not going to dominate and go 7-8 innings, but if you can get 5 innings, 1 run every time Spenser Watkins goes out there for as long as he sticks in this Orioles rotation, that is just huge for the O's. And Watkins had some stuff working. He got 10 whiffs on 37 swings, including 4 on the cutter, 3 on the slider, and 2 on his 4-seam fastball. He was dotting that 4-seamer for some called strikes, dotting the cutter for some called strikes. He had 5 strikeouts, and it was a lot of called strike threes. And he was just fooling these Cubs hitters all night. And he didn't throw as many curveballs as we saw him throw in his last start. Just 6 curveballs and 2 changeups of his 86 pitches. He really just focused on fastball, cutter, and slider. Was almost essentially a 3-pitch guy through his 5 innings on Wednesday night, but it worked out once again. And, you know, the cutter continued to work a little better as he's using it in better spots, locating it better. I'll take that every day for Spenser Watkins. Again, I don't think Spenser Watkins is long for this rotation. I think when Kyle Bradish comes back, he could replace him. So hopefully when DL Hall gets to the big league soon, as he dominated again this week, he will replace potentially Watkins. But Watkins has given the Orioles everything he has this year. It's been very impressive. Fourth thing you need to know is that the Oriole bullpen was its usual self after Spenser Watkins left the game. And, well, they were able to put in 4 scoreless innings to finish this one off. Now, the last 2 pitchers did have a little bit of trouble. Joey Crable had to throw 25 pitches in a scoreless 8th, and Brian Baker 20 pitches in a scoreless 9th that included a hit and a walk to finish out the game. But the first 2 relievers were dynamite. Dylan Tate entered after Watkins gave up the leadoff single in the 6th, went 1-2-3 with a strikeout. Cionel Perez went 1-2-3 in the 7th, and then Crable and Baker again labored a little bit, but each put up zeros as well. Cionel Perez, his ERA is now down to 0.90. He has not allowed a base runner in his last 6 appearances and has not allowed an earned run in his last 11 appearances after a 1-2-3 7th on Wednesday night. What a pickup he has been. Coming up next week on the pod, we'll really break down what Cionel Perez has done so well so far this season. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this one is that, you know, it wasn't only that the Orioles scored early with 3 in the 1st and then 1 in the 2nd as well on Trey Mancini's RBI double, but it's that they also scored late to add on, because after they had a 4-0 lead through 2 innings, the Orioles offense went silent. 3rd through the 7th, 5 innings there. They, I believe, only had 1 base runner in those 5 innings. They were completely shut down, mostly Justin Steele, who kind of, you know, threw things back out in this game, and Rowan Wick helped him out of the bullpen, but they did not do anything. And then that 8th inning became huge for the Orioles because, you know, it was a 4-0 and then a 4-1 game throughout most of that time, but you'd like to hold more than a 3-run lead. And the O's got a 3-run eighth inning. And yeah, it was, maybe a little bit unconventional how they score those 3 runs in the eighth inning. But at the end of the day, you're going to take it any way that you can get it. You get the Adley Rutschman RBI double, you get the Rougned Odor RBI single, you load the bases, and then Daniel Norris balks with the bases loaded, allowing the Orioles to score their 7th run. And those tack-on runs were huge in this game because it allowed the Orioles to go to Joey Crable, who's still really good, but to go to Crable and Baker in the 8th and 9th instead of having to use Bautista and Lopez in the 8th and 9th again. And even though, there is an off day today, so it probably wouldn't have mattered even if they did use Bautista and Lopez. Jorge Lopez and Felix Bautista have been pitching a lot this season and a lot lately, so it's nice to get them an extra day off with the day off Thursday, have them fully rested for the series against Tampa this weekend. But that's how they did it. 7-1, the Orioles win it. They are over 500 at 45-44. They have won 10 games in a row and get to enjoy another off day coming up after that. But of course, one of the reasons the Orioles have been on this winning streak, both on the field and in the clubhouse, has been Trey Mancini, who did have a 1-for-5 with an RBI double, drove in a run in the 2nd on Wednesday night, but just continues to be a big part of this lineup. And there's a lot of questions surrounding Trey Mancini right now because he is certainly a trade chip. A lot of teams are interested. He is most likely an upcoming free agent this year. And the big question around Birdland, especially the past couple of days, is should the Orioles trade Trey Mancini? Well, coming up next, I'm going to lay out the reasons why the Orioles should not trade him, why they should hold on to Trey for the rest of this season, even if it means they won't be re-signing him and won't get anything for him when he walks in free agency. But first, got to tell you about BlueNile.com, because whether it's that special time that you're ready to hop the question or just any milestone moment, you can find jewelry as unique as her to celebrate her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. And if you don't know what you should be looking for, or you have questions, or you're just having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to find you a memorable gift at every budget as well. So make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. So use the code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. So the Orioles take down the Cubs 7-1 on Wednesday night to win their 10th straight game, get over 500 on the season. And it was another nice day, another RBI with a double for Trey Mancini. And continues to take us into this conversation that really blew up on Twitter among Orioles fans this week, and conversation that's been being had most of this season, really. Should the Orioles trade Trey Mancini at the deadline? And Britt Giroli, who of course used to cover the Orioles, now is a national baseball writer for The Athletic, wrote a great column in The Athletic earlier this week and laid out the points why she thinks the Orioles should not trade Trey, even if it means he walks in free agency, and, citing multiple things. And I put out on Twitter that I agreed with most of what Britt wrote in The Athletic and wanted to lay out my views as well on why the Orioles should hold on to Trey Mancini. And first, I want to put it out there, and I'll address this later in the pod too, that I get the reasoning behind the people who want him to be traded. Listen, he's going to be a free agent, even though, the Orioles put a mutual option in his contract for 2023. Those rarely get picked up, and sources have told multiple reporters that mutual option is not going to be picked up, that he's going to be a free agent after this season. So I get, when you are still in a rebuild, although the Orioles are coming out of it, you want to get the most that you can from your guys who are upcoming free agents, because the O's are not going to sign him to an extension, it looks like, either. I had heard during the 2021 season that there was no extension talks. Doesn't seem like there's been any talks during this season either, which really means he's going to walk. So I get it. If a guy's going to walk and he's got value like Trey Mancini does, there's certainly an argument to be made to trade him, to get back some prospects who will help you down the road and try to get something for him. And, maybe let him go play for a contender, try to make the playoffs. Well, here's the thing. The Orioles might be a contender right now. They're 2 games out of a playoff spot. on July 14th. And first of all, it's important to know that Trey Mancini certainly does have trade value. This is not me yelling into the void about a below average hitter that isn't really going to bring anything back. He could bring a little bit back, but here's what Trey's stats looked coming into Wednesday night's win. 79 games, 341 plate appearances. He's been healthy basically all season. A 281 average with a 358 on base and a 417 slugging with 8 homers and 15 doubles. That is a 121 WRC plus for Trey Mancini and a 1.2 WAR according to Fangraphs. He does have a 339 BABIP, which, with the league average around 290 means he's been, maybe a little lucky when he has put the ball in play. But on the flip side, he's been unlucky with his power. Despite just 8 home runs total, Baseball Savant and StatCast say that he is expected, in terms of his batted ball data, to have 15 home runs. That's almost double the number of actual home runs he's had, because he has been the player in baseball most hurt by the Orioles moving back the left field wall this season. But he's got an 8% walk rate, which is right around his career average, but a 20.2% strikeout rate is his career low. He, has brought down his strikeouts. His chase rate is at a career low. His whiff rate is at a career low. And to couple that, he's still hitting the ball hard, and his 43.6% hard hit rate is a career high. So, 2019 was a great season for Trey, and I would still say that's the best of his career. But 2021 or 2022, I should say, so far has been a close second in terms of Trey Mancini's best seasons of his career since he got called up late in the 2016 season. And so that is all to tell you that, other teams want Trey Mancini. But here's the thing. I get that he could get the Orioles some players, but would it be enough? But more importantly, this is not the time to do it. Now, if the Orioles has gone 2-8, 3-7 over the last 10 games, if they were 8, 9, 10 games out of a playoff spot, if they were still well under 500, I'd be upset about it. But I would get why the O's would trade him. I would get it. They're not bringing him back. He's going to walk in free agency. You're bad again. Things are getting a little better, but you're bad again. You get something for Trey. You let him go play for a contender, try to make the playoffs for the first time since the 2016 AL wildcard game, and, hope that he has a good time playing playoff baseball maybe and signs a nice contract somewhere else. But that's all changed with a 10-game winning streak, with an over 500 team, with a team 2 games back of a playoff spot. That has all changed for me. First of all, he's helping the team. He's hitting second, third every night, playing DH and first base. And I just mentioned his stats, a 121 WRC plus. That's top 3 in the Orioles lineup right now. He's not blocking prospects. Yes, if the O's traded him, they would maybe have a little more wiggle room to, DH Adley more, maybe play Tyler Nevin more. You could maybe call up Kyle Stowers, have him DH more at that point. But generally, Ryan Mountcastle's here. He's playing every day. There's not really a first base prospect who's ready to come up. The guys who I think should be in the big leagues fairly soon for the O's over the next couple of months in terms of hitters, Kyle Stowers, an outfielder, and then 3 infielders in Jordan Westberg, Gunnar Henderson, and, potentially down the line, Taron Vavra as well. Trey Mancini's not blocking any of those guys. Yeah, if Trey Mancini's not here, guys like Stowers and Gunnar maybe, can get more at-bats, or the guys around them can get more at-bats because you free up the DH spot if Mountcastle's playing first base every day, and it makes it easier to DH Adley when he's not behind the dish. But Mancini's not blocking anybody. And he's playing well. Again, a 121 WRC plus. And the big thing here, too, the argument still stands of what would have been the argument against trading Trey, even if the O's were 10, 15 games under 500 right now instead of being over. Is it really worth it to upset the fans that much? We're not talking about Anthony Santander, who's been a good player for the O's and offensively is having, a similar to better season than Trey Mancini and has been with the Orioles for almost as long, since 2017, at least in the big leagues. But Anthony Santander does not mean nearly as much to the city of Baltimore and to Orioles fans that Trey Mancini does. Just to essentially, it felt like, go through that cancer experience with Trey Mancini in 2020. The fans felt that. To have him return to the field in 2021, to be a part of him getting back to baseball, and now really getting back to the Mancini we know at the plate here in 2022. All he has meant for Baltimore, for the Orioles. He's the only guy still here from that last playoff team in 2016. He was on that playoff roster. He pinch hit in that wild card game. He's a leader of this team. He's a veteran guy. He's 30 years old. And if he wants to be here, which it seems like he does, he deserves to see this season out. It's not going to be worth what the O's get back, which I'll get to in a bit about what that could be, to alienate a lot of fans by trading Trey Mancini. And you were going to alienate fans by trading Trey no matter what. The O's could be 20-60 right now, and trading Trey would still alienate fans. But I think a lot of fans would get it, and I would get it a lot more if the O's were 15 games back, way out of it once again. You're not going to re-sign him. Try to get something for him. But the O's are in this. As crazy as it's been and seems, and we know they have less talent on this team than all the teams above them in the AL wildcard race. And I know the chances are slim. I know the Fangraphs playoff odds projections are still below 3% for the Orioles. But they're in this. When you're 2 games back on July 14th, you're in it. And it could change before the actual trade deadline, which comes up on August 2nd this year. Maybe the O's start losing some games here right after the All-Star break and kind of come back down to earth. And maybe that changes things a little bit. It would. If the O's went on like a 3-7 stretch, it would change this argument just a little bit if they're, further out of it by the time the actual trade deadline rolls around. But not enough at this point. This team is playing really well, and they've got reinforcements coming. DL Hall, Gunnar Henderson, they're going to be here soon. And the Orioles, there's been multiple rumors. They may try to add a little bit at this deadline. They're not going to be full sellers. They're not going to be full buyers. They're going to be somewhere in between, trying to add talent that has multiple years of control, potentially a starting pitcher. We'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. But if they're going to add guys and try and win some more games this year, Trey deserves to be around. And listen, I'm still on board for giving him a 1 or 2 year extension beyond this to bring him back. But that seems to be out the door. So at least see this out with Trey Mancini. He deserves it. The Orioles fans deserve it. And I get Mike Elias is not going to make decisions with his heart. He shouldn't. To be a GM of a baseball team, unfortunately, you got to be kind of cold-hearted sometimes when it comes to these decisions. He's not going to make this decision with his heart. But my hope is that with the O's playing this well and Mancini playing this well, the best decision with your head is still to keep him around for the rest of the season. And that's kind of the sentimental argument here. But, there's also the argument of, well, what would the O's get back? So coming up next, we'll talk about what would the O's potentially get in a Trey Mancini trade and why that just kind of adds to the argument of it wouldn't really be enough. But first, let's talk about betonline.net, your one-stop shop for all your sports gambling needs. Now, we're right in the middle of the Major League Baseball season, All-Star break coming up. You can get odds on the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game and all the Major League Baseball regular season games at betonline.net. But it's not just that. You got the MLS season, the WNBA, and of course, every weekend, MMA, boxing, and golf as well. Get all the lines, all the injury news, all the scores at betonline.net. You can even listen to podcasts like this one as well. They've got live betting, esports, scores, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. So we're talking Trey Mancini. As the O's have won 10 in a row, they are over 500. And should the O's trade Mancini at the deadline? I spent a lot of the offseason, a lot of early in the season, basically mentally preparing myself for the Orioles to trade him. Because I figured the O's would not be anywhere near 500 at this point, and it would just make sense to deal him because they weren't going to offer him an extension. And I was going to be sad, but I was preparing myself to live with it. I'm done preparing myself. Don't do it. It's not worth it. And I laid out kind of the, more heart overhead points, sentimental points. But there's also the point of what the Orioles would get back for a player like Trey Mancini is not nearly worth the hit it would take to the fans, the hit it would take to this clubhouse right now to trade Mancini. And I get it. Most contenders could use Trey Mancini. Listen, especially with the DH in the National League now, every team contending for a spot could at the very least use Mancini off their bench and probably in a DH or first base role. Now I get it. He doesn't really play the outfield. And that kind of hurts his value. The O's have tried him in the outfield. It's just not good. He's a first base DH. He's also 30 years old. He's also an upcoming free agent. And he's at best a little above average defensively first baseman. All those things hurt him a little bit. But I wanted to take a look at some recent trades on some similar-ish players to see what the Orioles could maybe get back for Trey Mancini. And there is one trade for a guy similar to Trey that's already happened this year. Last month, the Seattle Mariners acquired Carlos Santana from the Kansas City Royals. Santana, a little bit older, a 36-year-old first baseman, but he is an upcoming free agent. Has a 115 WRC plus this year. Mancini at 121. They've been having similar offensive seasons. Santana known as a pretty good defensive first baseman as well. And now Santana has a much better track record than Trey Mancini. He's a multi-time All-Star when he was younger, especially with Cleveland. But you can see where the comparisons come in between Santana and Mancini right now. First base only guys having pretty good years, but 30 and above, and they're free agents. Kansas City did not get much for Carlos Santana. They also sent cash to the Mariners in the deal, and the top prospect was William Fleming, who they got, a right-handed pitcher who in the preseason Fangraphs rankings was ranked number 26 in the Mariners system. And then they got a right-handed pitcher in Wyatt Mills, who is 27 years old already, no longer a prospect, and now has a 7.01 ERA in 25 2/3 career big league innings. The Royals did not get enough back for me. That is not a trade I would want to do. A guy like Fleming and Mills for Trey Mancini. That does not move the needle whatsoever. And that's kind of what the market is going to be. Now, maybe Mancini could command a little more than Santana. He's 6 years younger, and he's had a better offensive season. But they're both first basemen only who are upcoming free agents. And although Mancini's offense has been better, it's not like it's a crazy amount better. It's just a bit better than Santana's been. And he's a little younger, maybe less likely to break down. But you'd maybe get a little more than the Royals got, but not much more for a guy like Trey Mancini. And that's nothing in terms of return. There's some other guys to bring up. Kyle Schwarber in 2021, a somewhat fair comparison. Now, Schwarber plays the outfield a little better than Mancini. Not much better, but a little better. He has more experience in the outfield, so maybe that makes him different. Now, Schwarber was a 28-year-old upcoming free agent, not a really good defender last year. Now, the difference in Schwarber, he had a 136 WRC plus with the Nationals before he was traded. He had run through June, hitting a home run every at-bat, so he was a hotter commodity, certainly at last year's trade deadline. But he got the Nationals one pitching prospect. Now, it was 20-year-old right-hander Aldo Ramirez, who was the Red Sox number 14 prospect in their system at the time. He has not pitched in 2022 with an elbow injury. And, 20 years old, he'd only pitched essentially in low A and rookie ball before the trade. So not a guy you're going to get super excited about. And yeah, he's got some arm talent. He's top 15 prospect in the Red Sox system, which isn't good though. Yeah, he's okay. That's not enough for me to trade Trey Mancini. How about Jock Peterson last year? Now, he's a little more valuable than Trey because he's had a better track record as a hitter. Big postseason moments as well. That helps the postseason team. Certainly he helped the Braves. And he plays the outfield fairly well, so you can stick him out there with more defensive versatility. But he was a 30-year-old upcoming free agent just like Trey. He was struggling a little bit. He had a 90 WRC plus with the Cubs before the trade, much worse than Mancini's hitting. He got Bryce Ball for this Cubs team. He was the number 11 prospect for the Braves. Not terrible, not great, but one player, it's not really going to move the needle like Mancini does. That's not worth it. You look through all those trades, and those are the most recent ones. There were some from 2020, but that's so hard to judge because you're going off a 60-game season. In 2019, probably too far away. But those are kind of your three ones that at least match up from the last 2 years. That's not enough. A return like that would not nearly be worth the pain to the fans and to the clubhouse and to just the team's success on the field right now. That pain of trading away Trey Mancini. It's just not worth it. I understand the argument. The Orioles need to compile more and more talent. They have to compete with an incredible AL East moving forward. And I get the argument that if they're not re-signing him and Most people still think the O's probably aren't a playoff team this year. They're not going to re-sign him. You got to at least get something for him. I get that, but I don't agree with it because Mancini's just not some other player with a 121 WRC plus on an expiring contract. He's Trey Mancini. He means a little something different to the Orioles fans and to the Orioles in that clubhouse. It's not going to be worth it to get rid of him. Keep him in Baltimore. If he walks in free agency, which is going to happen, it happens. But let him see this out with the Orioles because maybe, I don't think it's likely, but maybe, just maybe, this team adds a little bit at the deadline, gets those prospects like Hall and Henderson up. Maybe they're in a playoff race in September. And wouldn't you like to have Trey Mancini around for that? He certainly deserves it with what he's been through with this Orioles team. So keep him. Keep Trey Mancini in Baltimore. But that'll do it for today's episode. We've got one more episode coming up this week on the pod tomorrow. Going to be talking some other Orioles trade rumors, not with Trey Mancini, but potentially what the Orioles could add at the trade deadline, because they may be some sort of buyers this year to try and pick up some starting pitching talent with multiple years of control. And coming up tomorrow, we'll take a look at who some of those players could be that the O's could target in trades before the deadline on August 2nd. But again, that's coming up on our Friday episode to finish out the week. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.